Welcome to G's Backstage Pass. Today, my guest is Lindsay Hotmire. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time because we're going to talk about your business and how busy you are helping other brands and things. You're a brand story consultant, you're a public speaker. We're going to talk about that as well. And you're a story coach. So, who is Lindsay?
Yeah, so I love that question. It's just, that's such a scary question. And so, yeah, the business world knows me as all of those things. Um, you know, I I don't ever separate myself from those things versus who I am in my personal life. I'm a wife of 25 years, a mom of four, ages
Congratulations.
21 on down to almost 16.
Wow.
I'm a woman of faith and family, and those two things
Hmm.
really kind of guide and define everything that I do. The way that I step into the world, it always revolves around those two things. My whole business has been shaped around what kind of mom do I want to be? How do I want to be available? And so those two things really, like, you can't know me apart from me pulling in those two things.
So, how was it like growing up and how did that shape your life?
Yeah. So I am number 2 of 4 girls, so,
Hmm.
never respected my parents more for raising 4 girls until I had 4 children of my own, and only one of
Right.
them was a girl, but I grew up in a really simple home. My parents were very self-made people. They came from a pretty rough childhood of their own and determined
Mhm.
that that was not the life that they were gonna create for their family, and so I watched them being self-made. And when I was a young teenager, my dad became a small business owner. And so I watched
Mhm.
that journey. Unbeknownst to me, I was learning about my own journey, all those years prior. And so I saw that journey. I saw how hard it was to do that. And so when I stepped in to my own role as a business owner, I didn't have a lot of misconceptions about it's supposed to be easy. Like, I knew it was going to be
Mhm.
rough. I knew it was going to take a lot of hard work. I knew the emotional toll that I should be prepared for. Um, and so that was really influential, just watching my parents be self-made and the hard work that they did. Another thing that they did, in my childhood that has stayed with me is they always reinforced this idea of needing to be true to who you say you are. Like, they would
Mhm.
always be like, when you go out, we have little birds in the stand. So, you are a pool girl. That was my maiden name. You need to, make sure you know who you are.
Right.
And I think that just reinforced, and while my parents didn't always get that perfect in their own lives because they're humans and
Mhm.
humans don't show up perfectly, it just reinforced this idea of self knowing and of self awareness, which are two big concepts that I bring into my own business and my own work with my clients. And so I guess that's my answer, how growing up has shaped my life.
So, how did you know that this is what you want to do with your life? Like, this is we talk about your why. When you know your why, it changes everything. How did you know, helping business owners, this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by the power of story,
Hmm.
the power that story has, specifically to help heal and reframe lives that sometimes feel very broken. I have said for a long time, stories speak life, speak worlds into existence. That's the power
Mm.
that story has.
Yes.
So when I'm able to step into somebody else's world and listen and observe and hear, I often say that I hear what I listen and I hear what isn't spoken. And it's in those spaces where the story that needs to emerge really comes into play. And it's so powerful then to see the people that you've stepped into that sacred space with, to see
Hmm.
take that story and take that language and use it in ways that just allow them to build the worlds that they need to build. And so that really is my why, just really unleashing that power of story, because
Hmm.
it's such a divine thing. It's magical. And when you can set that free, when you can unleash it, it's humbling every single time. Like, every single time I step into that space with clients, it's extremely
Hmm.
humbling.
So, One of the biggest fears that everybody has to face at some point in their life and their career is the fear of public speaking. And you are a very well-known public speaker. You've been doing this for a while. How did you overcome the fear of public speaking?
I don't know that you ever overcome it. I think that there is a little bit of that healthy fear of stepping up
Mhm.
on the stage because it reminds you, number one, that you are in sacred space. You are entering into this agreement or this transaction with the audience because you have a message to share and you're asking them to sacrifice their time to
Mhm.
actually tune in and listen. And so I don't always work to overcome that fear, the butterflies, the anxiety that comes up with showing on stage because that feeds you, that's part of the
Right.
energy that shows up with you. But to keep it from becoming overpowering and all
Mhm.
consuming, I can remember one time before I went out on stage and, the nerves are just trying their best to undo you and just saying to myself, Lindsay, this isn't about you. And
Mm.
that reminder that I'm not up there for myself, I'm not up there to have the spotlight on me. It's about showing up as a helper, as a guide, as a comrade with my audience to say, you know what, we all want to get better. We all want to learn something. Let's have a conversation. This is really just a piece of the conversation that we're having. And
Mhm.
when I can keep that at the forefront of my mind, it's not about me. That helps to alleviate a lot of the fear that can, be all consuming as a public speaker.
And like you said, another thing to remember is there's a reason why they've invited you on that stage. So
Correct.
it's like it's yeah, we always talk about how whenever whether you're going on a podcast or you're going on TV or you're speaking in front of a crowd, if you just have that conversation, like that one-on-one conversation, it can take away a lot of that fear and anxiety. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about your unbrand method and brand storytelling. I was looking at your website and everything. I want to really let the audience know more about this unbrand method that you have and your brand storytelling.
Yeah. So the unbrand method is my method that I created to help
Mhm.
clients. What I discovered is that so often they're coming to me after they've tried everything else. They've worked with other storytellers, they've worked with other coaches, they've tried to find their story on their own. They've done all the formulas, they've done everything that, people are teaching them to do, and it's still not working. And so when we start to parse that out, it's like, why is this not working? Like, why aren't those formulas working? Why aren't those easy fill in the blank templates working? And it's to my belief, it's because story doesn't start at the formula. Story doesn't start at the template. It starts much deeper than that. It starts back
Mm.
to that self knowing and that self awareness that I talked about that I
Mhm.
learned as a kid. And I say stories exist for two reasons. They exist for us to either build culture or to preserve culture. That's why we tell stories. Even in our
Mhm.
brands and our businesses, that's what we're doing. We're seeking to do one of those two things. But we can't do that without a deep understanding of this concept called our worldview. Everybody has a worldview. It's the way
Mhm.
that you view the world. It's this special set of glasses we use to step into the world, to engage with people, to attract the right people to us, um, to position ourselves. Everything we do anchors. It's like the axis of our life is that worldview. And so the Unbrand method uses the three questions of a worldview to really peel back the layers of my clients so that they can understand who they are, how they need to show up in the world, and how they need to engage with their audience. And so those three questions are, why am I here?
Okay.
What's gone wrong with my world? And
Mm.
then what can I do to fix it? And what those
Mm.
two really get at the core principles of business, which is, what's my value? How do I position myself? You know,
Mhm.
how have I actually done that? And I think that those two questions are questions we ask a lot in the business world, like, what's my why? Why am I here? What's gone
Mhm.
wrong with my world? Like, what's the unique value? What problem am I solving? We're really good at kind of talking about those pieces. The
Mhm.
that we don't often connect is that third piece. What can I do to fix it? As marketers, especially in my
Mm.
world, it's so easy to look in and say, this, and this is broken. We're really good at pointing out what's broken. We're great
Right.
deconstructionists, but
Right.
we're not very good at saying, here's what we can actually do to fix it. And when we really dig in and see that, that's when all the pieces start to fall into place and we can step into our space with the confidence that formulas and templates and things like that can't really help us get at the root at with our story.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point about formulas, and it may work for one person, but this isn't. I mean, when it comes to sharing your story, it's not like you remember those growing up those Mad Libs
Yes, yes.
where you would ask play it with your friends or with my sister play it, and be like, okay, give me a word, and then you read it back, and then it was something really funny, but it kind of, I mean, it's kind of serious because I think there's a lot of people out there that are trying to take something that's already made. Okay, just pop this word in here, try this, do this, and make it their own. And I really think that having that authenticity is what's going to separate, is what's going to make business owners stand out.
Absolutely. I often use the analogy of it's like running a race in somebody else's shoes. Um,
Ooh, okay.
I would call myself more a jogger than a runner, but I do run often. And so anybody who runs or even hikes understands that you have to train in your own pair of shoes. You can't say, what, I'm going to run a marathon. And who's Kipchoge, I think, is like the world's fastest marathoner. I can't take his pair of shoes and decide I'm going to wear the shoes that he won his last marathon in, and I'm going to have the same success. That
Wow.
doesn't work like that. I have to wear my
Wow.
own shoes because if I wear somebody else's, I'm going to have shin splints, I'm going to have
Mhm.
injuries. It's just not going to work. I have to train my own race. And so that's the same for when it comes to finding your brand story. Like formulas and templates are great. They have a place. They are helpful. They help speed up the process sometimes. They help simplify. But there's a concept in an idea called phenomenology that has shaped my work. And there's a
Mhm.
phenomenologist, well known. His name is Max Van Manen, and he talks about this idea that formula is not the thing that informs the human experience. It's the other way around. So formula can't
Mm.
write your story. Your story basically informs the formula. If that, so it's the inverse of kind of
Mhm.
what we're taught. And so that's the core essence of my work is kind of flipping things on its head and saying, okay, you've tried everything else. Let's flip it on its head and really find the story that's been there all along and the pieces of that story that are going to connect you to your audience, the pieces that are going to help you find and understand and own your value and nail
Mhm.
your positioning and really understand what successes you have had and shape those in a way that help you stand out as a brand.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm really digging this unbrand method because I think we're so taught that it has to be done this way because the person teaching it worked for them. That makes sense. This is
Right.
a system I worked with and it worked for me, so it'll work for you.
Mhm.
And like you said, just taking that and then flipping it on its head and being like, you know what, that is such a great analogy, man. Lindsay, that is a great analogy. Trying to run a marathon in somebody else's shoes, because the concept is like, well, I would never do that.
Right.
That makes no sense to try. I probably won't even fit in the shoes.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
like, and then that's a really good analogy of us trying to make our business fit into this mold that
Absolutely.
other people have. And I'd
Absolutely.
love to know more about your brand story wheel
Yeah,
and
that's a
how. Yeah.
tool. That's a recent tool that I've developed, and the my
Mm-hmm.
UNbrand method fits inside this brand story wheel. And what that
Mm-hmm.
is really there's it's three stories that we need to understand about our audience. So when
Mm-hmm.
we're developing kind of our offers, when we're developing our brand story, when we're trying to figure out our value and our positioning and owning our successes, before we can do any of that, we have to understand the three central stories. So the one is the problem story. So if you're my potential client, I'm going to dig
Mm-hmm.
into you and say, what is it that's really driving your problem? Why are you here? And essentially, for my clients, it's going to be one of three things. It's going to be you don't really know how to talk about your value or how to own it. You don't really know your place, like where should you position yourself? How should you position yourself? And you don't really know how to talk about your successes, even though you know that's important because clients need those to know that they can trust you. And so I'm going to dig in with those three things and really understand where's the crux of your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next piece is your preferred story. So we all have a problem story, then we all have the preferred story, which essentially is just the reverse of the problem story, right? If it's like,
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay, I don't know my value, well, your preferred story is going to be, I want to know my value. And then the third piece is where I come in with the solution story. So, okay, these are the things you're struggling with. How do we solve those? And that's where some of my tools come in, like the UNbrand method is a big piece that helps to address the value piece. Client interviews, a tool called the Johari window that I use to help foster self-awareness and get a more holistic viewpoint of how you see yourself versus how others. And so just about 9 different tools that I use to
Oh,
help my
wow. Yeah.
audience bridge that gap between their problem and their preferred story. And when all of those are introduced, that's where the story gets birthed. That's where it comes out of, is out of that work.
So, any tips for coaches that are promoting their business, like we're saying about rather than trying to follow the trends and anything, any tips to stand out
Yeah.
in the market for coaches?
I think for me, it all comes back to that brain story wheel. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you know how to explain, do you understand your value, and do you know how to explain it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you bringing to the table? Do you understand your positioning, which is essentially, once you understand your value, then do you know how you bring that to a table in a way that's only unique to you, because we all have a
Oh,
unique fingerprint. And what
yeah.
we do is we try to front load our positioning with, we try to front load our story with our positioning. Like, how am I unique? How do I stand out in a way that nobody else does? But that's backwards. And so what we first have to do is understand, what are we bringing to the table to begin with? Like, don't worry about the 100 other people in your industry that are bringing the same thing. That doesn't matter at this point. What are you bringing to
Mm.
the table? And then once we dig in, then you can understand that unique positioning. How are you doing it in a way that nobody else can? Because nobody else has lived your experience. You are the only one with your experience, and those experiences bring a unique edge to that value that you're showing up with. And then the last thing is to not be afraid to claim and name your successes. And sometimes when you're just getting started, those might feel like more intangible successes. You might not be like, you might not have $1 million client that you helped, earn that $1 million because you're new to the game. But that doesn't mean that there aren't intangible results that you can't
Mm.
focus on and start sharing at the beginning until you get some of those more tangible stories to tell. There are successes, and it's hard to name and claim them. It's hard to own them when you don't have the value and the positioning understood, because it's almost like a game of pin the tail on the donkey. Like, where am I even supposed to look for success, Lindsay? I don't even know. But once
Right.
you understand those other two things, then you can
Right.
start zeroing in and looking at your relationships through that lens and understanding, okay, this is how I've uniquely stepped into this space. This is how I've influenced it. This is the impact I've made.
Wow. This is really, really great stuff. This is because I love that you're taking I think we spend so much time even from young being educated in certain ways, right? And then as business owners, we spend so much time being educated in like, okay, this is the method. This is how to do it. This is how to do it. And then here you come in and say, "Well, let's flip that on its head and let's figure out what really works for you." And it may not be what works for this person over here. And like you're saying, yeah, the solving the problem, I think as business owners, we let what other people are doing or competition kind of determine what we do, and maybe following trends. Like maybe this year everyone's doing this, but last year everyone was doing this. And like you're saying, with having that authenticity, of
Absolutely. Yeah, and part of my work is a competitor overview. Like, I always dig
okay,
into clients' competitors or their aspirational brands. There's nothing wrong with looking at your competitors, but
okay,
what we do, and I did this when I first started, is you look at other people and you're like, oh, they're doing that, so I can do that too, right? And so you try to fit yourself into that round hole when you're the square peg. And so then you're
Mhm.
going from hole to hole trying to figure out where you fit, because you've started the whole game, the whole story, with looking at your competitors. And that piece comes much later in the process of finding your story, because once
Mhm.
you understand your value, once you start to put some of those other pieces together, once you understand how your worldview is shaping everything else, then you can look at your competitors with this clear understanding and really like this confidence of, okay, this is what they're doing. And it's not so much of, I can do that too. It becomes more of a, and here's the gap that they don't fill that I do. And so that's
Right.
where my leverage is. My leverage is here. This is where I can fill, or this is how I solve that problem in a little different way. Or here's my competitor, but they serve a complete different audience segment than I do.
Right.
When you look at the outside world without that inner understanding,
Mhm.
things go wrong really fast. And that's why small business owners, in 5 years, so many of them don't survive. um, that's why so many of us feel like we're just on a hamster wheel running round and round,
Right.
trying thing after thing, is because we're leading from the outside first when it should be from the inside out.
Yeah. And I think as business owners, we need to remember there's no lack. There's no like you're not gonna run out of like on the secret they talk about in the movie in the book The Secret. They go, well, isn't the universe just gonna run out of stuff? And it's like, well, not everybody's asking for the same thing or and same thing with business. Oh, aren't we going to run out of clients? There are billions,
Right,
billions of people on this planet. And if you can solve just that one problem and be so fine tuned and focus on that, I mean, your audience is your potential customer base is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And you're just looking for a very small
right,
percentage of that to really become successful. So I think a lot of it I think for business owners, we might get overwhelmed with the, oh, well, I mean, there's, so much competition out there. But really, when you look at it, you're just getting at, you know what I'm trying to say? Just
right.
focus on that small piece of the
Mhm.
market,
Right.
right?
Yep. Yeah. And it really is like when you can focus in on, and it's so scary um, to do this, but when you're focusing on connection and relationship and resonance over competition, um,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you start building those bridges that people can cross over to
Right.
find you.
Right. So you have been a guest on lots of podcasts and lots of shows, and I would love to know what are some qualities or things you look for in a host or a show when you're deciding if you're going to be a guest on that show.
So probably 3 things. One, obviously, like, do they even serve my market? So I'm not gonna, be on a podcast that talks about sports, because that's not my market and that's not even my expertise. And so I
Right.
make a very bored fan, and that's about it when it comes to sports. And so do they even serve my market?
Mm-hmm.
I think especially if you're just getting out, it can be really tempting to just jump onto any podcast that comes along your way. But if they're not getting you in front of the right people, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the second question, do they serve my audience? Is it getting me in front of the right people? Um, that's really important. And then the last piece is, do the does the host align with my values? That's a really important piece for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, we don't have to see eye to eye on everything. We don't have to agree on everything either. But if a host is selling a form of business that makes me cringe every time I see it, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not I'm not going to agree to come onto their podcast, unless the conversation is going to be explicitly to kind of break that down and to have that open conversation as to why I don't align with
Right.
the business.
Right. Right, because you're a brand, and every time you're out on a show, you're marketing your brand, so it's important to align with the right brands and the right podcasts out there.
Right. Right.
So now it's time to talk about music. This is Backstage Pass. It's rock star. This is the signature question of the show. So, Lindsay, who is your favorite rock star?
Well, truthfully, I'm not a person of favorites. I guess I'm kind of eclectic, and so I don't ever have like I'm never a fangirl of anything.
Okay.
But so I can't say my favorite. I can say like one of the people I've become recently enamored with, his
Hmm.
story is Franz Liszt, which was a Romantic era composer, pianist. His story is intriguing, and I still don't know like, I'm not an expert on him at all. I have played piano my whole life, but what I
Hmm.
know about him and why I would say he's my favorite rock star is because in many ways he was the original rock star. I mean, he totally transformed the way that concerts were done. Like we have him to thank when you're in a concert or a recital and the pianist comes in, real dramatically from the side of the stage and sits down. He transformed that. Women would take his handkerchiefs, they would take his broken piano strings, they would take his velvet gloves and tear them to shreds as souvenirs. They would stick his
Wow.
cigarette butts in their cleavage. They you think of the most famous rock star and how, you think of Elvis and when girls would just swoon and faint over him. That was Franz Liszt. That's what he did. He completely
Wow.
transformed the way that concerts and presentations were done. And then from him, we see that evolution that just continued to further develop. And so I think it's really fascinating to look at him as the original rock star because of
Wow.
what also is unique about him. He was a very charitable person. Like he gave piano lessons. He never charged because he didn't believe that as an artist, it was his job to charge to give art to others. Um, and he gave so much of his money to charitable organizations, which to me is the epitome of the best rock star that you want to follow is
Hmm.
somebody who's giving like that, which is often hard to find. But so yeah, going way back further than you were probably prepared for, but I find him very intriguing.
I've got to Google this guy now because no, that's amazing. So, so how can people work with you?
So yeah, my website is lindsayhotmire.com. There's a couple ways, obviously I can help with the brand story. I can come alongside you as a story coach. One of my
Hmm.
favorite ways to interact with clients as kind of this low level, like how can we get you a quick win and then see where we can go from there is through something that I offer called the Power Hour. So it's just 1 hour where we're digging in together and getting some really powerful insights that can be applied immediately and really make a big difference in how you move your business forward without this huge investment.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorites.
Nice. And people can connect with you on LinkedIn. That's how we connected through LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
I reached out to you. Thank you again for taking time to, be a guest on G's Backstage Pass. I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. So, to learn more about Lindsay and how she can help your brand, go to lindsayhotmire.com. All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Say hi to the family for us, for
All
Sandy and
right.
I.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a great day. All right. Until next time.
Okay. Bye.
Cheers.